H.J. Heinz once hired a person just to smile. That was the entire job. Stand in the office and greet strangers with a smile. When people asked him about it, he said, "It is worth something to me to have someone in the office who can meet strangers with a smile." Word spread through the company. The boss was raising salaries for people who could smile. Smiling became popular. Heinz said, "It's good business to employ men and women who smile." These opening words come from the book that I wanted to talk to you today about, and it's called One Life Can Make a Difference. It was never about the ketchup, the life and leadership secrets of H.J. Heinz. And this book was written by Steve Lentz. This book is only about 120 pages, and it's a fun and fast read if you would like to learn a little bit more about H.J. Heinz. And today, we'll go through the most valuable lessons that you and I can learn and use in our business. Heinz, he had a Rolodex of maxims, and at the front of the list was to do a common thing uncommonly well brings success. And I couldn't agree more. This is something we're going to see over and over today. Taking the common things and doing them uncommonly well. And when I think of something common, the smile, well, that is certainly at the top of the list. 100 years later, Sam Walton, he's going to place greeters at the front of his stores to smile. And this is going to be considered revolutionary in the 1980s. HJ, he's doing this in the late 1800s. For Sam and Walmart, the greeter, it changes how the customer feels. When you walk into the store, if there's no greeter there, you're like this ant in a massive warehouse. When you're greeted at the front door, you feel more like a valued guest entering into a small neighborhood store. This just changes your whole mentality. Walton, he had discovered this idea at a store in Louisiana. And at that particular store, theft was insanely high. So the manager at that store, he took a friendly employee and he put them at the front of the store to greet customers. And from the Sam Walton autobiography, Made in America, he tells us about the first time that he experiences the greeter. He says the following: "The first thing we saw as we opened the door was this older gentleman standing there. He said, 'Hi, how are you? Glad you're here. If there's anything I can tell you about the store, just let me know.'" Sam, he's curious. He goes on to ask more questions. And the man explains the following. He says, "The greeter has a dual purpose: to make people feel good about coming in and to make sure people weren't walking back out the entrance with merchandise they hadn't paid for." So, like a flash of lightning, Sam, he knows immediately that he needs to roll this out to every store. And this is how Sam grew Walmart. He collected ideas, good ideas like this, and he applied them. Now, if we turn back the clock here and we focus on Heinz, he was a visionary. Perhaps he was 50 to 75 years ahead of his competition, maybe even 100 years ahead in some specific areas. On episode 29, you and I, we studied the life of H.J. Heinz. And from the Quentin R. Skrebeck Jr. biography about Heinz, we learned the following around this. Heinz is often noted for his marketing genius, but overlooked for his advances in process control, quality control, automation, flow technology, vertical integration, and assembly techniques. Heinz operated assembly lines before Henry Ford. His overall process and quality control systems were at least 50 to 75 years ahead of industry. And so far for the show, I've read about 40 biographies or autobiographies, and Heinz is easily in my top 5 favorites. His brand survived today 150 years later, and every person listening to this, they probably have at least one of his products in your house today. Yet we don't hear a lot about Heinz. From the late 1800s and the early 1900s, his name, it gets lost to others like Carnegie, Rockefeller, JP Morgan, and the Mellons. If we really want to study a leader that cared about his people, cared about quality products and building a lasting business, then I believe that Heinz is the perfect model for this. And I don't want to stop talking about him. The title of the book says it all. It wasn't about the ketchup, it was about the people, and it was about those in his Heinz family. And more importantly, it was about doing common things uncommonly well. For Heinz, it all starts in the soil at the age of 8 years old. He's out there helping his mother in the family garden every single day. He's filling up the basket with extra fruits and veggies, and he goes around and he sells them door to door. That basket, 2 years later, it turns to a wheelbarrow. 2 years after that, the wheelbarrow turns into a horse and wagon by the age of 12 years old. His parents were John and Anna. They led by example, always showing him what to do, not telling. At the heart of the family was a creed of willingness of self denial, willingness of sacrifice for others, and willingness of integrity. This was simply expected out of HJ, and he took it seriously. And along with this, his mother taught him a lifelong rule: always remember to place yourself into the other person's shoes. HJ never forgets this rule. Is an example of this early in business. One of his employees was in charge of weighing all of the incoming apples from farmers. When those farmers weren't paying attention, he would sneak a few extra pounds across the scale, thus shortchanging those farmers. Well, this employee was so proud of the fact that he was stealing that he brags about it to HJ, who gives him a little nod, walks him into the cashier's office, and fires him. The employee says, "Well, Mr. Heinz, I was just saving you money." HJ's response to this: "You are robbing a man who was selling to me, and you are robbing me of something more precious." He puts his hand on the man's shoulder and he says the following: "There is only one way. Be as square to the other fellow as you are to yourself." Heinz always followed this rule of treating others fairly and putting himself into their shoes. This was his guiding principle. A key line from the book that I love so much, this is really good. Very few men, an amazing few, possess the fundamental, vital principle of all learning the principle of recognizing facts wholeheartedly, even when they are uncomfortable and unwelcome. It requires a mind of absolute integrity to recognize truths. A man must love truth. HJ, he had this really remarkable ability to set aside his own ideas and his own beliefs to seek out the truth and act with insane levels of integrity. People, they know him as honest. His handshake to the farmer or to the customer is solid gold. And he learned this from his parents and he never betrays it. In the book, it makes a valuable point. It says that true inheritance, it isn't about money, it wasn't about land, or it wasn't about houses. It's about the real things: the character, the honesty, the humility and kindness and willingness to learn and lead. Because without this transfer, fortune is simply like the wind. It's here 1 minute and it's gone the next. For a young HJ, he's out there working his 3.5 acres of land, selling vegetables to local businesses. Along with this, he's taking a few classes in bookkeeping and he starts helping at his father's bricklaying company as well. HJ, he becomes a master brickmaker. He's expanding the plant, he's improving recipes to make stronger bricks, and then he goes out and he wins contracts to supply major buildings around the Pittsburgh area with bricks. But his true love is in the garden. He first put his hands in the soil at the age of 8. Fast forward 17 years later, he puts his hands into the business. He founds his first company with his partner, L.C. Noble. They call it Heinz and Noble, with an eye to grow and bottle not ketchup, but horseradish. It's grown on 3/4 of an acre that they had, and they work out of a single bedroom in the basement of the family home. And everything starts super small, and this was intentional. Heinz always started small. This is how he learns, and I really admire this because this is how I also learn. And the goal here is to learn everything possible about the growing, the producing, the bottling, and selling horseradish. His hands were on every single bottle. To HJ, the details matter. They matter a lot. The product quality matters. The sale matters. He takes what is common and he does it uncommonly well. To 99% of producers, when the sale is closed and the product is delivered, it's basically good luck. You're on your own. Heinz, he didn't operate that way. He was the 1%. He thought further ahead. He really had a vision here because he could see past the merchant into the housewife's kitchen and directly to the family table. And to get there, well, he wanted the merchants buying his products to get every worth out of the penny that they spent to make a profit for themselves. In fact, one of his business customers is on record of saying the following: I always paid him a little more than I paid anybody else. But what he sold me was not only more satisfactory, but I never lost money on what I bought from him. But more importantly here is to build a base of satisfied customers. Soon this is going to start stacking for HJ as customers they start asking for his products by name. In the early days, it's slow and steady. He wanted to know that his organization was able to make the product better than it was being made elsewhere. And then this next line is key here. Once he was assured that his premises were sound, few men were likely to move more quickly or go further than him. Now, if you want a playbook on stacking greatness, H.J. Heinz is absolutely your author. Next to him in this is Harry Schneider, who founded In-N-Out Burger in 1948. Harry, he was also obsessed over the details. He wanted to make the perfect burger and fries. He used only the choice meats and the best part of the tomatoes and the onions. What he threw away, most restaurants would use. Harry was obsessed with quality. He also wanted a clean kitchen and friendly employees. And when you step back and you look at it, Harry Schneider was doing something very common, but doing it uncommonly well. So uncommonly well that cars, muscle cars, cars packed with families, and cars with surfboards strapped on top stretched down the street at all hours of the day, waiting for that delicious, juicy double double. And I can taste it now. But we got to keep going. And I can't help thinking that as Harry Schneider was growing Heinz, he was right there in the kitchen guiding them along, not only with the products that were physically on the counter, but more importantly, the spirit of doing a common thing uncommonly well. These great founders, they know you have to get it right first. Absolutely, you have to get it right. That builds your business foundation so that you can start putting up your walls of growth all around it, which is what H.J. Heinz did for the next 6 years. By 1974, the sun is shining down on over 100 acres of Heinz farmland. He had new branch offices in St. Louis and Chicago that were both thriving, but the financial panic of 1873, it's starting to send ripple waves all across the nation, terrorizing banks and businesses. In early 1875, Heinz, he had committed to buying this crop of cucumbers. He wasn't buying partial crops. He had put his name on the line to buy everything. The weather that year, unlike the financial markets, was perfect, and this produces a bumper crop that overflows his warehouses. And as a man of his word, Heinz holds true and he buys everything. Yet he is financially strapped. And he's out there. He's borrowing money from every single bank in Pittsburgh and he's trying to keep the books positive. But that wave of terror catches him when one of his business partners bounces a check. Panic alarms are set off that the Heinz and Noble ship is sinking. Banks, well, they stop lending money and they start calling notes. By Christmas of 1875, H.J. was bankrupt and penniless, and he writes the following in his diary. This is tough to read. No Christmas gifts to exchange. Sally seemed grieved and cried, yet said that it was not about our troubles. Only she did not feel well. It is grief. I wish no one such trials. I have no Christmas gifts to make. And at that time, he had a couple of young children, and that had to be extremely difficult, especially as a father. You want to make that a happy time for your children, and here you are, you're broke and penniless. Add to that the fact that his business partners, they turned their backs. The banks turned their backs well before he went bankrupt. HJ is beaten down. He's been steamrolled forwards and backwards by the panic. His family rallies around him. The spiritual wisdom of his mother, it lifts HJ enough, just enough so that he can get out of bed. And as a man of his word, he goes back to what he knows, taking small steps. HJ, he opens a little book of accounts and he writes the following inscription on the front cover. M.O. Book of H.J. Heinz, 1875. M.O. being moral obligations, or basically who he owes money to. He writes down every creditor, every name, and every amount, and he charges himself personally with paying back everything that he owes. Now, it's important to know that under the bankruptcy laws of the time, he wasn't required to do this. He could have taken the easy path, followed the law, and skipped out on all of these debts. But paying everything back, this is Abraham Lincoln level honesty right here. Who was a young man, Lincoln? He had a general store in New Salem, Illinois. That store failed after his partner dies. In Lincoln, he's left holding what he calls the national debt because he owed more than $1,100. And he could have just walked away, but he spends the next 15 years paying back every single cent. In the reflection of Lincoln, HJ, he moves forward and he pays back all of his moral obligations over the next 3 to 4 years. Heinz, he understood that goodwill isn't something you go out and buy. It's something that you give. And when you're starting over with nothing, it's really the only currency that you have. To put it plain and simple, his future business grows 100, hell, maybe even 1,000 times more by taking the slower path at the start. And what's that saying? Go slow to go fast. This describes H.J. Heinz perfectly. Now, with the help of his mother, his wife, and his brother, they're able to scrape together $3,000 in hard raised capital. Less than 2 months after losing everything, he's back in business. But more than anything, and perhaps this is one of the most critical lessons of the entire episode, and one of the reasons that I admire HJ so much, is that he has his good word in his honesty that he's been building up. People understand that when he says he's going to do something, it gets done. He leads with his heart in his actions. The goodwill, it comes back around. Store owners welcome him back with open arms. Consumers, They recognize his name because Heinz on a package, in their minds, it means quality that they can trust. They're not afraid to put the Heinz brand on their family kitchen table. Heinz, he starts rebuilding his business and his team of employees. And it was the team, the men and the women that worked for Heinz, they were the heartbeat of his organization. Heinz was way ahead of his time in building what is called a paternal organization. Or, in more modern terms, we could also think about this as servant leadership. And this comes from the spirit of helping and teaching. This is what Heinz was known for. As an example, one day, Heinz observed some men unloading lumber from a railroad car to this upper story window of the plant. And he could see that they're straining, they're really struggling under some poor management here. Needless to say, it's less than efficient. Now, he could have pulled the foreman aside and scolded him and tried to make corrections on the spot. Or even worse, he could have yelled at the men directly. But that is not Heinz. Instead, he takes off his hat and his coat and he climbs to the top of the train car. Many of the men think he's just making some kind of joke at first. And so what does he do? He starts working right alongside the men. And after a few minutes, HJ says, "Do you think we might make it easier by handling stuff this way?" They try it out. It seems to work better. Next, he climbs up to that factory window and he takes over bringing lumber into the window himself. After a few minutes, he makes a couple more suggestions. Things work even better still. Things are now working efficiently as HJ had seen them in his mind. Never once did he stand around and act like the smartest person in the room. He never yelled, he never scolded. It was help, not correction, that inspired his instructions. And why does it work? It's real simple, I think. It says right here in the book. Mr. Heinz was always willing to put himself into the other man's shoes, and he was able to do it because he had learned. He went to extraordinary trouble to make men believe that they were discovering things themselves. HJ was always a student first. He has an unquenchable thirst to learn and share with others. In fact, he would often get a chuckle when someone that he had guided came to him and said they had a new method, convinced that they had invented it. That was his goal, to make others feel like they were part of the organization because they were, and he wanted them to succeed. On the wall of Heinz's office, there was a placard with a maxim on it, and it said, "Find your man, train your man, inspire your man, and you keep your man." It's still there today. Heinz, he didn't go out and hire superstars. He hired and he had an eye for people that were honest and hardworking. And more importantly, he believed in them. Everyone started at the bottom and they learned the basics. Heinz had a policy of only promoting from within inside of the company. In his mind, each man and woman who was employed made up the Heinz family. He believed in keeping men, and men did not willingly leave. His character made men want to stay with him, even in the beginning when he only had hard work and small reward to offer. As a leader, Heinz, he was out in the fields and on the factory floors. He didn't sit at a big fancy office all day long shouting orders. It was the work, the dignity, and the honesty to produce the highest quality products that stole his heart and his mind. This was his focus. As Heinz trains employees, he didn't just teach them how to do tasks and walk away. He inspires his employees to seek out future successors and train them in a similar style. Now, in this manner, what he's doing is he's leapfrogging his knowledge ahead in time by several generations. Absolutely brilliant. Now, as you're growing your business, especially a new one that you're figuring out, there's always gonna be mistakes. And those are just plain expected. HJ knew this. And what he would do is he would actually have contests for the person who could make the most mistakes. Not the same mistake over and over, but the most mistakes. And as part of that contest, there was also a catch. You had to have the courage to stand up before your peers and admit your mistakes out loud. The results, they have this ripple effect because employee after employee, they stand up and they admit their mistakes. What they're doing here, they're telling on themselves, look, I made this mistake, but the lessons stick because no one feels threatened or hurt. Every individual knew that he could afford to admit a mistake because there was no fear of humiliating rebuke. Now, to make that same mistake twice, this isn't tolerated. Heinz, he expected that you were going to learn from your mistakes because at the end of the day, it is about the quality that goes into the product. This was the focus. One maxim that Heinz always said: quality is to a product what character is to a man. The major lesson here that we learned from Heinz is that when employees feel corrected, they're going to resent you. Now, on the other hand, when they feel like they've been helped, they're going to follow you anywhere. When people went to work at Heinz, they almost never left. Now, if we go back to Harry Schneider, this is the exact same mentality that was developed at In-N-Out Burger. Employees, they almost never left. And the only reason that Harry opens new stores, I love this, was so that employees have a place to advance their careers. He was doing it for the employees. He wasn't doing it to grow or to get rich. He just wanted places where his employees could come and learn and grow and become better at what they were doing. Now, if we flash back to H.J. Heinz here, he continues to get bigger and bigger. He has over 6,000 employees, 25 factories across the United States, Canada, and Europe. He has more than like 100,000 acres of crops. Vertical integration is alive and well. He's making his own bottles, boxes, tin cans. He has more than 250 railroad cars so that he can ship raw and finished goods. And at the height of all of this, a group of financiers, they come to HJ and they offer to buy him out. Their pitch: hey, you've worked your whole life. It's time to sit back and relax. Enjoy your life. Go have some fun. His immediate response, and this is how you can really tell that he loves his business: I do not care for your money, nor do I or my family wish to go out of business. We are not looking for ease of rest or freedom from responsibility. I love this business. Your talk of more money and less responsibility means nothing to me. To stop work is death, mentally and physically. Amen. I love seeing founders with this mentality. This isn't work for HJ. It's play. He's doing exactly what he loves. He continues on saying, this business is run not for my family or a few families, but for what we call the Heinz family, the people who make our goods and sell them. The Heinz policy is to work for a better business rather than a bigger business, to make, if possible, a better product, and to make better people as we go along. We are working for success and not for money. The money part will take care of itself. As for those financiers that wanted to buy him out, well, they're never mentioned again. Heinz never sells. Those last few lines, those are my favorite. We are working for success and not for money. This is pure Henry Ford, who said the following: the only foundation of a real business is service. A manufacturer is not through with his customer when a sale is completed. He has then only started with his customer, and I often wonder if Ford was a student of H.J. Heinz because they have a lot of similar thinking. Because H.J., he built his entire business by giving his customers value in the products that he sold to them. This value was just the start of the business relationship. Heinz, he builds on top of this. Horseradish first, then pickles, then ketchup, all the way up and past 57 varieties, which we're going to talk about more in just a moment. And then on top of this, his products are asked for specifically by name. Do you have Heinz? The customers would ask the shopkeepers. And if you're a shopkeeper and someone's coming in asking for a product by name, what are you going to do? You're going to stock your shelves with Heinz products. Another great founder that I love, Jim Casey, he started UPS. He said that service is the sum of many little things done well. This is also pure H.J. Heinz. Service, service, and more service each and every single day. It was always about service. And how so? Well, just check this out. This applies to his employees. He's servicing his employees here. He was among the first employers in the country to provide dining rooms, locker rooms, dressing rooms, clean uniforms for men and women. Just think about that. That's all standard stuff today. No one was doing that. He takes it further. He brings in a nurse, then a doctor, and a dentist, all free for employees because he felt that if employees were healthy, they would work better. He wasn't wrong about that. He builds an auditorium in the plant for lectures, performances, music, and dancing. He installs paintings and flower boxes all throughout the factory because he believes that the working day should be a happy time. He held this really curious idea, and in the 1800s, this was just considered generally strange, but the idea is that good work is done only by happy and contented workers. And as we've learned from so many episodes in the past, that when your workers are happy and they feel safe and secure in the workplace and they know exactly what they need to do and they have clarity on what they need to do, your customers are only going to reap the benefits long term. And this is what happened. Now, one thing I wanted to talk about, if you recall on the last episode, we spoke about Stephen King in his book called On Writing. And he said that it wasn't your job to find ideas, but it was your job to recognize when they show up because they always do. We have to keep our minds open. Ideas are always going to show up. Well, for Heinz, one day he's riding on the train to New York and it's the year 1896. He's riding along, enjoying his day, and he sees a sign for a shoe company and it says 21 Styles. Immediately the gears in his mind, they start turning and he tells himself, well, we don't have styles, but we do have variety or varieties. Yes, we have varieties. And let's see, we have pickles, that's one. We have ketchup, that's two. He keeps going. He reaches 57 and he goes well past 57. But for some reason, that number 57, it just keeps coming back over and over in his mind. He's at the point where he can't ignore it. He's amped up and he believes this is brilliant. And as soon as the train stops, gets off and he dashes down to a printer and they design an ad immediately. And he goes nationwide with his 57 varieties slogan. And that is how one of the most recognizable slogans in American history was born from a shoe ad. And right here, this is a living example of recognizing an idea that shows up and putting it into action. The absolute best genius of this ever, in my opinion, here is Sam Walton. He was a genius at this. He was relentless about visiting competitor stores, seeking out the best ideas, and then putting them into action. And it's really, when you think about it, a very simple strategy that you and I can both use in our businesses and hell, even in our personal lives. These founders, they teach us to keep our eyes open, keep our hearts and our minds open to the possibilities because they're always directly in front of us each and every single day. When we started the episode today, we started talking about something so very common, the smile. What's more common than the smile? Heinz, he hires people to smile. He takes the common and he does it uncommonly well. This was his whole philosophy, to do common things uncommonly well. Do them today and do them again tomorrow. And the uncommon results are going to follow. He didn't see a basket of vegetables as a small thing. He also didn't see paying back creditors that he legally didn't owe as a small thing. HJ, he understood the art of bricklaying. Each of these small actions are like bricks. Each day he stacks more bricks. When HJ turned 70, he was surrounded by 70 of the most prominent men in America at a surprise birthday dinner. He stood up, he's barely able to keep his composure, and he says, "In a sense, I have done very little. I have tried to inspire a little in others because I believe in humanity. I believe in men." Then he gives his philosophy on life. There are three things men should do in this life. The first is to plan for the comfort of our loved ones. The second is to so live that we may enjoy the respect, the esteem, and the confidence of our fellow men. Last but not least is to do just one greater thing: live for the hereafter. Young HJ, he started with the basket. He grew his business and lost everything in the financial panic. He opened a notebook and wrote moral obligations on the front cover. He climbed lumber piles in his own factory, and he hired someone just to smile. He turned down a fortune because he loved the work, not the money. Quality is to a product what character is to a man. That's what H.J. Heinz teaches you and I. This is where we'll end the story today of H.J. Heinz's life. I hope that you can pick up a copy of the book. It's only about 120 pages or so, and it's really an enjoyable read. I'm really inspired by H.J. Heinz, a man who was celebrated for being kind. And he didn't just survive, he built something that's lasted for more than 150 years, simply by taking common things in life and doing them uncommonly well. I just wanted to leave you with one final thought from the book here. This is a paraphrase summary, but I think it speaks in doing the common things so uncommonly well. His oldest associates cannot remember that he ever spent 20 consecutive minutes at detailed desk work. He could rarely be induced to listen to an elaborate financial statement, but he would spend hours in the plant with a group of workers over some seemingly trivial detail in the handling of food products. Anything connected to the work was vitally important to him, no matter how little it might seem to others. He was a producer first and foremost. The fruits of the earth meant something actually sacred to him. The tiny organization of 1876 and the huge one that he lived to see were all inspired by the dominant regard for the product of the earth as something precious. Until next time, make it a beautiful day in the neighborhood, my friend.